countries around the world are setting their sights on the upcoming Inter-Korean summit scheduled for April 27th. Chiefly among them, regional powers such as the United States, Japan, China, and Russia are watching the developments on the Korean Peninsula closely as it gears up for the upcoming summit. Washington reacted quickly by agreeing on a US-North Korea summit just 3 days after the announcement of an Inter-Korean summit.
President Trump appreciated the briefing and said he would meet Kim Jong-un by May.
The Inter-Korean summit is likely to set the tone for the upcoming meeting between Trump and Kim, where discussions over denuclearization and a framework for peace may come to the fore. The success and failure of the Washington-Pyongyang summit in May could hinge closely on the outcome of the third Inter-Korean summit.
This is a comprehensive approach in support of the president, and we're continuing to move forward with those conversations.
Japan was taken aback and reacted with surprise to the Inter-Korean summit agreement. There are concerns being raised in Japan that Tokyo may have lost its role as an influential player in the developments surrounding the Korean Peninsula. In an attempt to stay relevant in the matter, the Japanese government expressed its interest in paying for the cost of nuclear inspections in North Korea by the IAEA. On the other hand, China and Russia have warmly welcomed the announcement of the Inter-Korean summit. On March 27th, a North Korean train departing from Pyongyang was spotted in Beijing, and it was revealed that Kim Jong-un had paid a surprise visit to China. During his 4-day trip to China, Kim Jong-un discussed the current situation on the Korean Peninsula with his counterpart Xi Jinping, while reaffirming his country's willingness to denuclearize. The Korean Peninsula is being closely watched by regional powers, but with divergent interests and political calculations in mind, their views appear to be falling out of alignment. So judging by the media coverage from your respective countries, how are they viewing the upcoming Moon-Kim summit? Are they seeing it as a potentially fruitful event?
Sure. The news about the Inter-Korean summit are big in Russia, and the Russian government is quite excited about that. Everybody is expecting a breakthrough. Possibly after that, as the Russian foreign minister said, this summit could pave the way for solving the North Korean nuclear issue by diplomatic means, as Russia always insisted.
Koichi?
Yeah, it's the news about Inter-Korean summit always go to our front page of our newspaper, so Japanese people are very interested in it. And also, at first, Japanese audience and Japanese media were quite skeptical about the Inter-Korean summit. But after NIS director So-hoon visited Japan, the atmosphere changed quite a lot.
남북관계의 진전, 그리고 한반도 비핵화를 위한 변화의 움직임과 관련해서 문재인 대통령님의 리더십에 경의를 표한다고 말씀하셨습니다.
I think because his director So-hoon's style is very welcomed by Japanese government, since he used to be a spy, turned to be a professor, then went back to his old profession, and because of that he is pragmatic and also very logical. So he was not the kind of person that spreading very optimistic view. He explained very logically. So atmosphere in the Japanese government slightly changed, and it affected the Japanase media's view too.
What about the US media?
Well, the challenge for American news organizations is the velocity of news. This administration is unprecedented in so many ways, and especially at the top with these constant changes at the minister level, right, at the cabinet secretaries. And so as a result, a lot of talk about the Inter-Korean summit has been crowded out, and there's a lot of attention on the potential Trump-Kim summit. But that perhaps ignores the fact that the Inter-Korean summit is highly important to get to the next one.
Now, you briefly touched upon this already, but there have been several changes to Trump's cabinet since he took office. Most recently, he appointed a new state secretary and national security advisor. How do you think these changes will affect what goes on in the Korean Peninsula?
There's a lot of concern about now the third national security advisor for President Trump, and that would be John Bolton, because John Bolton is seen as such a hawk. And really, there's some criticisms of him that say that he's never met a problem that he couldn't solve by bombing it. And so that is actually, you know, counter to a lot of the diplomatic approaches that we're seeing on the Korean Peninsula right now. But John Bolton has said, in response to questions about his hawkishness, that his job is really to present the president with all possible options, seeming to leave the door open to let this diplomatic situation play out.
All right. Now let's move on to China and Russia. So President Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin have undertaken steps to ensure their long-term presidency.
Вместе возьмемся за большую масштабную работу во имя России.
这次大会选举我继续担任中华人民共和国主席。
Do you think this added level of political stability will affect how they approach the North Korea issue?
I do not think that it is going to change the rules of the game. As I have already mentioned, last year Russia and China have presented the joint roadmap for solving the North Korean nuclear issue. And I think they're just going to head on with this plan. You know, last year it seemed that the plan is not going to work out when the tensions were rising. But after the new year, it looks like it's playing out.
Okay. So last Tuesday, at least you already touched upon this, last Tuesday, President Xi Jinping and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un met face-to-face in what was Kim's first visit abroad since taking office. What was likely discussed between the two?
Chinese side reported that they discussed about the nuclear issue, and North Korean side didn't mention about that. So there are quite big difference. But also, I have to recall that in year 2000, Kim Jong-un's father, Kim Jong-il, did exactly same thing before he met President Kim Dae-jun. And right before that, he took a trip to Beijing. So it's same kind of scheme. He has reconciled and he developed relationship with China before confronting with South Korean leader and then US leader. Right. Year 2000, they were planned to meet with President Clinton in Pyongyang, right? So it's very similar.
Very similar, same protocols. Now, Pyongyang and Beijing, they're by and large seen as very close allies. Why do you think it took them so long for the two leaders to meet face to face?
Of course, because North Korea did many nuclear and missile tests, which was China asked not to.
So that was the major reason?
That's a major reason.
What do you think was discussed between the two, Elise?
Well, we know generally what was discussed from the readouts from state media, right? From state media in North Korea and in China. The Chinese readout of the meeting does include the affirmation by Kim Jong-un that he wanted to meet with the United States, which was important because the South Koreans were the only other entity who had reported that out from their meetings with North Korea, because North Korea hasn't said so. But China said that is something that Kim Jong-un discussed, as well as the commitment to somehow denuclearizing. But the key part of what he said was denuclearization, so long as there's kind of a parallel movement from the other side towards peace. And so that is actually the North Korean line that we've heard for a long time, which is that they want peace on the peninsula, which means U.S. troops off of the peninsula, and for the U.S. to remove its security umbrella over South Korea. And that is highly unlikely. So I'm not sure that policy-wise things have really changed here, but there is a lot more diplomacy happening.
Right, for sure. Now, for each of the four major countries invested in the Korean Peninsula, there are probably slight differences in how each country would define a successful inter-Korean summit. What are some outcomes of the Moon Kim summit that would benefit the parties?
Of course, hopefully some step to the denuclearization, but also the Korean stability on Korean Peninsula is good for all of the neighboring countries. Last year, there was spreading rumor that, some kind of war might happen, and that's because of that, many Japanese tourists stopped coming to South Korea, and it's not a good thing. So, the peace and stability is very good for all of us.
Are there any specific outcomes that would benefit Russia aside from denuclearization?
As Koichi have mentioned, bringing stability, additional stability to Korean Peninsula could help develop Russia's Far East. And Russian government is currently concentrating and working hard to do that, considering the relations with the West. So Russia hopes that to attract more investment to the Far East, and of course settling the North Korean nuclear issue would play a certain role in that. That would help to bring the money to Russia.
Right. Then conversely, what do you think Pyongyang wants the most from the regional powers?
Well, not only for the regime to stay in power, but also for the regime to be seen as an equal with the rest of the world, which it certainly is getting, right? I mean, Kim Jong-un was the one, he's been kind of leading the way here. He was the one who unlocked all of this diplomacy by, in his New Year's speech, striking this conciliatory tone. As a result, everybody else, all the rest of the countries have jumped, including the huge country, China, and the United States. And so Kim is really sort of conducting and calling the shots here in a way that I think punches way above its weight. I mean, this is one of the poorest countries in the world. It's tiny compared to the rest of the countries that they're dealing with, and yet they're playing diplomatically almost on the same level. They're getting these sort of face-to-face meetings in the way that he got with Xi Jinping. He got this whole treatment, banquet dinner, and all of this stuff. And so Pyongyang, you could say that this achievement in and of itself is what Pyongyang wants.
Right, so they probably already got what they wanted.
They already got what they wanted in a lot of ways.